Sam Alman recently conducted a remarkable interview at the World Government Summit. In it, he disclosed fresh insights on AGI, discussed the economic ramifications of GPT-5 AI being open source, and shared his vision for the future. Stay tuned till the end of the interview as I'll delve into why this matters and explore the broader implications for artificial general intelligence.
I mean, it's like that very first cell phone with the black and white screen that can only display those like numbers and, it just didn't do much. But there was enough in there, you're like, I can make a call, that's cool. And at the time, that seems great. And then it took us, I don't know how long from that, but many decades from that to the iPhones we have today. And the thing we have today is incredible. And it took a massive amount of scaling in all these different ways to get there. But we have now is like unimaginable at the time of those like first primitive cell phones. And I think that's why we have to push forward. We're at this barely useful cell phone. But people still like making phone calls, it turns out. And if you can make a better way for them to do it so they can go walk around the world while they do it, sure, that's great. But that's not what we want to deliver. We want to deliver the iPhone 16 or 15 or whatever the current one is.
And what's the timeline to reach the iPhone 16 from the current Motorola that we have?
You got to be a little patient. That's like it took the world a while to do that last time around. So give us some time. But I will say, I think in a few more years, it'll be much better than it is now. And in a decade, it should be pretty remarkable.
And if we're going to compare GPT-4 to GPT-5, because you're at the cusp of this, you're actually seeing it at the forefront. What is the difference? Like, if I'm excited about GPT-5, what should I be excited about?
I was sort of laughing a little bit because this is going to sound like an annoying answer, but I think it is the important part. It's going to be smarter. There are all of these other things, we can talk about. It'll be better at these kind of tasks. It'll be multimodal. It'll be faster. Who knows what. But the thing that I think really matters is it's going to be smarter. And this is a bigger deal than it sounds, right? Because what makes these models so magical is that they're general. And so if it's a little bit better, if it's a little bit smarter, that means it's a little bit better at everything. And the thing that I think is most exciting is it's not like this model is going to get a little better at this task and not really better at these, or, it's not that. It's because we're going to make the model smarter, it's going to be better at everything across the board.
Have you watched the movie Freaky Friday, where these two people switch places?
I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it.
So the thesis or the idea of the movie was two people switched places. They moved into different bodies, and they lived each other's lives. Let's assume today is Freaky Tuesday, and you become the Minister of Artificial Intelligence of the UAE. If you were going to take one regulatory decision for this country, knowing what you know, seeing what you see, what would you do?
Does that mean you have to take my job for a day?
I would love to do that, just for a day.
You have fun with that. It's not as easy as it looks.
No, I know it's very hard, but I'd love to experience it.
That'd be great. Anytime you want to switch, I will greatly look forward to that. What I would do,
that was a curveball, by the way.
No. It's a really thoughtful question. I'm trying to give a thoughtful answer. I think what I would do is try to, and I know you've done some work in this direction, and I really appreciate it, but I would try to find a way to create more of a regulatory sandbox where people could experiment with this technology and be able to figure out sort of like imagine, whatever you want to call it, what the world could look like. And then I would try to see what makes sense and what doesn't, and write the regulation around that. I think it's very hard. I think we have to try, and we're going to anyway, but I think it's very hard to get all of the regulatory ideas right in a vacuum. And if there was a sort of a contained way that I could find a way to like give people the future and let them experiment with it, and then see what made sense, what went really wrong, what went really right, and write the regulation around that. That seems like an interesting experiment.
So I have great news. We already have a platform here called the Reg Lab that does that. The only issue is, I think it hasn't proliferated yet to be truly global. One thing that I think we should do is actually look at how we can take it to the next level and use a specific use case there for AI rather than just broad technologies, right?
Can I change my answer? I thought more.
You can change your answer 100 times. Go
I
on.
still think that's a good thing to do, but since I only have one day, a better thing to do.
Okay.
One thing that I have been thinking about, so the world is going to try all of these different regulatory approaches. There will be your sandbox. I think it's awesome that you have that. Other people do other things. But we are going to, and I think that's actually really good, but we are going to need, I believe, at some point, some sort of global system. The example that I've given in the past is the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, for what happens with the most powerful of these systems, because they will have truly global impact. And what sort of auditing, what sort of safety measures do we want in place before you can deploy like a super intelligence or however you want to call an AGI. And I think for a bunch of reasons, the UAE would be so well set up to be a leader in the discussions around that. I would like host a one-day conference with leaders from around the world to brainstorm about that.
Consider it done. We'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd love to come.
I'd like to just move on to the regulatory issue. So I remember the first time we had this conversation on artificial intelligence or regulating AI, the dangers, the opportunities was, if I'm not mistaken, was it 2017 that we met in LA when
Yes.
you hosted that?
Or 16.
Either 16 or 17, one of those years. And we were having a discussion, and you actually put forward a vision for AI that's going to change the world, alongside Elon Musk and a few others. And you also mentioned some of the dangers. There are a lot of efforts today on regulation. There are efforts by the UN, there are efforts by the G20, by the G7, and others. In terms of these efforts, are they hitting the mark, you think? Is there something else that we need to do? We have a lot of people here that represent international organizations and that represent governments. What more should we do? And if it's doing well, how can we make it even better?
Frankly speaking, I think we're still in the stage, and this is not necessarily bad, but we're still in the stage of a lot of discussion. So there's, everybody in the world is having a conference, everybody's got an idea, a policy paper, and that's okay. I think we're still at a time where debate is needed and healthy. But at some point in the next few years, I think we have to move towards like an action plan with real buy-in around the world.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Like exactly what is necessary to make that happen?
I honestly don't think that is for OpenAI to say. I mean, we have a lot of ideas. We've tried to contribute them to the discussion. I think a lot of other people have a lot of ideas. This is a big thing. Like, this is going to touch all of us, and this is going to, I am very high conviction that we can manage our way through this, but it's going to take a great deal of collaboration, and it's going to take our leaders of the world coming together, and, that's I think, not for us to set.
Maybe another thing that we can just jump to quickly. If we're going to talk about governments that do not have the resources of a company like OpenAI or a country like the UAE, countries that are limited in their resources and the, let's say, directions that they can take on these things, what advice do you have for them on the LLM race right now? What should they do? Should they use, in your opinion, closed source or open source tools? Should we choose sides, or should we just go for the best application and the best utility? How would you go about this?
We're giving this a lot of thought. We're trying to, we want to have like an offering that makes sense for countries that want to offer AI services. But in the meantime, I think what people are doing right now, which is just sort of use these APIs or run open source models, I think that'll make sense.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, you guys open sourced GPT-3. Is that correct?
GPT-2 we did, I don't think 3.
GPT-2, okay. Is there a sense that you guys are going to open source the models as you launch new ones? So, for example, as 5 comes along, you're going to open source 3. Is that something that you guys are thinking about, or is that not on the table?
I think you should expect us to open source more things over time, but exactly what and when and how we're trying to figure out. There are like great open source models, open source language models out in the world now. And, I don't think what the world needs is like another similar model. So we'd like to do something that is helpful and new, and we're trying to figure out what that might be.
I'd like to now just jump into something that the fear-mongers and the opportunists talk about. What is the most thing that you fear when it comes to the deployment of AI, and the most thing you're optimistic about? Like, if I'm going to tell you what keeps you up at night and what keeps you going in the morning, give me one reason for that and one reason for the other.
The keep up at night is easy. It's all of the sci-fi stuff. I think sci-fi writers are a very smart bunch, and in the decades of sci-fi about AI, there have been unbelievably creative ways to imagine how this can go wrong, and I think most of them are like comical, but there's some things in there that are easy to imagine where things really go wrong. And I'm not that interested in like the killer robots walking down the street direction of things going wrong. I'm much more interested in the like very subtle societal misalignments where we just have these systems out in society, and through no particular ill intention, things just go horribly wrong. But the thing that wakes me up in the morning with energy every day is what I actually believe is things are just going to go tremendously right. We got to work hard to mitigate all of the downside cases. They are, I think, very significant and real potentials to confront. But the reason that we go think so hard about how to deploy this technology safely is the upside is remarkable. I think we can easily imagine a world in the not super distant future where everybody's got a better life than people have today. I think we can raise the standard of living so incredibly much if everybody has access to abundant amounts of really high quality intelligence, and they can use those tools to create whatever they want to do. That's like pretty amazing. This is like kind of how I think about it, but people are like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to say it anyway. If you think about everybody on Earth getting the resources of a company of like hundreds of thousands of really competent people, and what that would do, if you have like an AI programmer, AI lawyer, AI marketer, AI strategist, and not just one of those, but many of each, and you get to sort of like decide how to use that to kind of create whatever you want to create, we're all going to get a lot of great stuff. The creative power of humanity with tools like that should be remarkable. So that's, I think, what gets us all up every morning.
But my final question, let's imagine that you're sitting right now in front of a teenager in Turkey, another teenager in the Middle East somewhere, like let's say Qatar or the UAE, and someone that's in Africa or Asia. And they're all asking you, what should we do in the future? How can we ensure that this doesn't take our jobs? How can we ensure that we are relevant in the AI age? How can we be part of this future that you just laid out that's very optimistic, that's extremely exciting? What would you recommend they do? Should they study something as a specific domain? Should they take a certain course? Should we just play with the technology? What advice do you have for them?
The first thing I would say is you are unbelievably lucky. You are coming of age at probably the best time in human history. You understand this technology. Young people are always the early adopters of technology, almost always, but certainly in this case. And you will be able to use these tools to do things that the people in the generation before you couldn't even imagine. You will have your entire career flooded with opportunity and the ability to do amazing new things. You'll be able to start companies that are phenomenally more impactful and successful than people the generation before you could. You will live in this incredibly expansionary opportunity, like just flooded with time of like massive opportunity, and you can kind of go do whatever you want. I think the ground under us all is shifting, the rules are changing, but the amount of value that'll be created and the ability for an individual to create a vision and will, it's a great time.
Thank you so much, Sam, for your time.
So why are we showing you this interview? Why is it so important? Well, I actually want to take a step back and show you the bigger picture of what Sam Alman is thinking, and then this. 2019. Interview is going to make a lot of sense. Check out this Wall Street Journal article. Sam Alman is seeking $7 trillion to build out AI chip factories. $7 trillion, that's trillion with a T, not billions. That is an absurd amount of money to raise, and if anybody were able to raise that amount of money, it would be Sam Alman. He is flying high right now, leading the world in artificial intelligence, and that's probably also why he's doing interviews with the UAE, because they have a ton of money to invest. But what is he going to do with 2051? $7 trillion. Well, he believes that's the amount of money necessary to build AGI, and AGI is going to take a tremendous amount of computing resources, and right now that is the biggest bottleneck on computing, and he also realizes that OpenAI's business is incredibly dependent on NVIDIA, so much so that I would even go as far to say that large language models are going to become a commodity. Open source models are getting better, closed source competition is getting better, and OpenAI seems to be about 6 months ahead. 21-23. Right now, but of course NVIDIA's CEO Jensen also has something to say. He thinks $7 trillion is way more money than is needed to achieve artificial general intelligence, and Jensen was at the same World Government Summit and said this: you can't assume just that you will buy more computers. Wang said you have to also assume that the computers are going to become faster, and therefore the total amount that you need is not as much. And according to this Business Insider article, he also suggested that the cost of building AI data centers 2154 globally would amount to $2 trillion by 2029, and there's about $1 trillion worth of installed base of data centers. Over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, we'll have $2 trillion worth of data centers that will be powering software around the world. So $7 trillion really seems to be over-investigation as to what it's going to cost. Plus, of course, NVIDIA doesn't want OpenAI to raise all this money and build their own data centers, because then the chips become commoditized. It is clear that Sam 22-25 Alman and the OpenAI team have absolutely realized that the large language models are not going to be their differentiator in the long run building custom chips. I hope you find this video informative. Give us feedback in the comments. Subscribe for more such informative videos. Thank you.